Hello, and welcome to my revision PowerPoint for AQA on biopsychology. To begin with, we're going to start off with the nervous system. The human nervous system is divided into the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, with each of these further divided into different components, each with a different function but all working together. As you can see, I've put a diagram of the nervous system, and I will take you through each of the parts. The central nervous system, comprising of the brain and spinal cord, has two main functions: the control of behaviour and the regulation of the body's physiological processes. In order to do this, the brain must be able to receive information from sensory receptors such as eyes, ears and the skin, and be able to send messages to the muscles and glands of the body. This involves the spinal cord, a collection of nerve cells that are attached to the brain and run the length of the spinal cord. The main function of the spinal cord is to relay information between the brain and the rest of the body. This allows the brain to monitor and regulate bodily processes such as digestion and breathing, and to coordinate voluntary movements. The spinal cord is connected to different parts of the body by pairs of spinal nerves, which connect with specific muscles and glands. For example, spinal nerves, which branch off from the thoracic region of the spinal cord, carry messages to and from the chest and parts of the abdomen. The spinal cord also contains circuits of nerve cells that enable us to perform some simple reflexes without the direct involvement of the brain, e.g. pulling your hand away from something hot. If the spinal cord is damaged, areas supplied by spinal nerves below the damaged site will be cut off from the brain and will stop functioning. The brain can be divided into four main areas. The cerebrum, which is further split into four areas. There's the frontal lobe, which is involved with speech, thought and learning. The temporal lobes, which are involved in hearing and memory. The parietal lobes, which are involved in sensory information such as touch, taste and pain. And the occipital lobe, which is involved in visual information. Next we have the cerebellum. This sits beneath the back of the cerebrum. It is involved in controlling a person's motor skills, balance and coordinating the muscles to allow precise movements. Abnormalities of this area can result in a number of problems, including speech, motor problems and epilepsy. Next we have the diencephalon. This lies beneath the cerebrum and on the brainstem. Within this area are two important structures, the thalamus and the hypothalamus. The thalamus acts as a relay station for nerve impulses coming from the senses, routing them to the appropriate part of the brain where they can be processed. The hypothalamus has a number of important functions, including the regulation of body temperature, hunger and thirst. It also acts as a link between the endocrine system and the nervous system, controlling the release of hormones from the pituitary gland. Finally, there's the brainstem. This is responsible for regulating the autonomic functions that are essential for life. These include breathing, heartbeat and swallowing. Motor and sensory neurons travel through the brainstem, allowing impulses to pass between the brain and the spinal cord. Next we have the peripheral nervous system. All the nerves outside of the central nervous system make up the peripheral nervous system. The function of this part of the nervous system is to relay nerve impulses from the CNS, which is the brain and the spinal cord, to the rest of the body, and from the body back to the CNS. There are two main divisions of the peripheral nervous system, the somatic nervous system and the autonomic. The somatic nervous system is made up of 12 pairs of cranial nerves. These are nerves that emerge directly from the underside of the brain, and 31 pairs of spinal nerves that emerge from the spinal cord. These nerves have both sensory neurons and motor neurons. Sensory neurons relay messages to the CNS, and motor neurons relay information from the CNS to the other areas of the brain. The somatic system is also involved in reflex actions without the involvement of the CNS, which allows the reflex to occur very quickly. The other division is the autonomic nervous system. This is involved in involuntary actions. This system is necessary because the body wouldn't work as efficiently if you had to think about them. This is further divided into two parts, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. As you can see below, there are examples of what the two systems do. The sympathetic nervous system is primarily involved in the responses that help us to deal with emergencies, so the fight or flight response, such as increasing heart rate and blood pressure and dilating blood vessels in the muscles. Neurons from the SNS travel to virtually every organ and gland in the body, preparing the body for rapid action necessary when the individual is under threat. On the other hand, the parasympathetic nervous system relaxes the body once the emergency has passed. The PNS slows down the heart rate and reduces blood pressure. Another benefit is that digestion will begin again under parasympathetic nervous division. Because the PNS is involved with energy conservation and digestion, it's sometimes referred to as the body's rest and digest system. Next I'm going to talk to you about neurons. Neurons are specialised cells that carry information throughout the body. They can either be sensory, relay or motor neurons. Each of the neurons consists of a cell body, dendrites and an axon. Dendrites at one end of the neuron receive signals from the other neurons or from sensory receptors. Dendrites are connected to the cell body, the control centre of the neuron. In the body, the impulse is carried along the axon, where it terminates at the axon terminal. In many nerves, including those in the brain and spinal cord, there is an insulating layer that forms around the axon, the myelin sheath. This allows nerve impulses to transmit more rapidly along the axon. If the myelin sheath is damaged, impulses slow down. The length of the neuron can vary from a few millimeters. So, as I said before, there's 3 different types of neurons. The sensory neurons carry nerve impulses from sensory receptors, so vision, taste, touch, etc., to the spinal cord and the brain. Sensory receptors are found in various locations in the body, for example, in the eyes for vision, the tongue for taste, and the skin for touch. Sensory neurons convert information from these sensory receptors into neural impulses. When these impulses reach the brain, they are translated into sensations, for example, visual input, heat, pain, etc., so that the organism can respond appropriately. Not all sensory information travels as far as the brain, however. Some neurons terminate in the spinal cord. This allows reflex actions to occur quickly without the delay of sending impulses to the brain. Relay neurons allow sensory to communicate with each other. These lie wholly within the brain and the spinal cord. The term motor neurons refers to neurons located in the central nervous system that project their axons outside of the central nervous system and directly or indirectly control muscles. Motor neurons form synapses with the muscles and control their contractions. When stimulated, the motor neurons release neurotransmitters that bind to receptors on the muscle and trigger a response which leads to muscle movement. When the axon of a motor neuron fires, the muscle with which it has formed synapses with contracts. Muscle relaxation is caused by inhibition of the motor neuron. The neurons communicate with each other within groups known as neural networks. Each neuron is separated from the next by a tiny gap called the synapse. Signals within the neurons are transmitted. Next we're going to look at synaptic transmission. A nerve impulse, which is an action potential, travels down the axon to the axon terminal. The action potential opens calcium channels, causing calcium to diffuse across the synaptic knob. The calcium influx triggers the release of neurotransmitters from synaptic vesicles into the synapse. The neurotransmitters diffuse across the synapse and bind to receptors on the postsynaptic cell. Here is a diagram of synaptic transmission. Synapses can be excitatory or inhibitory. Firing off excitatory synapses gives the instruction that receiving neurons should send an impulse along its action. Firing inhibitory synapses instructs the neuron not to send an impulse. So next we're going to look at the endocrine system. This is a network of glands throughout the body that manufactures and secretes hormones. It works alongside the nervous system to control vital functions in the body. It instructs glands to release the hormones directly into the bloodstream via blood vessels. These hormones are carried towards target organs in the body. Below is a table with certain glands and their functions. If you pause this video, then you can take some notes. Hormones are important in the endocrine system. Behaviour is thought to be influenced by hormones, and each hormone is thought to influence our behaviour in a different way. Hormones are chemicals that circulate in the bloodstream and are carried to target sites throughout the body. Although hormones came into contact with most cells in the body, a given hormone usually affects only a limited number of cells, known as target cells. There has to be a particular receptor for a particular hormone. Cells that don't have a receptor cannot be influenced directly by that hormone. When enough receptor sites are stimulated, this results in a physiological reaction in the cell. Timing of hormone release is critical for normal functioning. The levels of hormones released. Too much or too little at the wrong time can result in a dysfunction of bodily systems. On your screen is a list of glands and the hormones they produce and the effects that the hormones have on the body. Okay, so finally we are going to look at the fight or flight response. When a person experiences a threatening or stressful situation, their body reacts in specific ways. The heart beats faster, their breathing becomes more rapid, and their muscles tense. These reactions are collectively known as the fight or flight response. This response evolved as a survival mechanism, enabling animals and humans to react quickly to life-threatening situations. The bodily changes associated with the fight or flight response allow an individual to fight off the threat or to flee to safety. Unfortunately, the fight or flight response can be activated in conditions that aren't life-threatening. So when you have an exam, probably most of us feel quite stressed, and this is our body's fight or flight reacting to being stressed. Or we've all had that situation where we like someone and we want to tell them, but we feel really nervous and we get like a butterflies feeling in our stomach. This is our fight or flight response. When someone is faced with a threat, an area of the brain called the amygdala is mobilized. The amygdala associates sensory signals, what we see, hear or smell, with emotions associated with the fight or flight, such as fear or anger. The amygdala then sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus, which functions like a command center in the brain, communicating with the rest of the body through a sympathetic nervous system. The body's response to stresses involves two major systems. One for sudden stresses, such as an attack, and the second for chronic stresses, such as a stressful job. And there we have it. That was biopsychology, what I think we need. And I would just like to say good luck to anyone who's planning on sitting an exam this afternoon, sometime soon, and I hope you do well. Thank you for watching.